I'm Angie Parker. I'm the chairwoman of the Virginia Tea Party Patriot Federation Cooperative Legislative Action Committee. We have 3 bills that we are proposing. The first is a bill that would prohibit the regulation of carbon emissions in the state of Virginia for many reasons. One, that an attempt by the EPA to regulate carbon is a violation of the Clean Air Act because the science proving that carbon dioxide is a pollutant is not a proven science, and that is a requirement of the Clean Air Act before the EPA is allowed to regulate carbon dioxide emissions. Our second bill is the Freedom of Speech Act. This is something that is very important to the grassroots community. Most of what we've done over the past year has been free media. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly, but social media networks. There's some concerns over the Obama administration's web wiretapping proposal that will be in front of Congress next year. The FTC has come out with a recommendation of how to reinvent journalism with a specific focus on quieting congregation websites like the Drudge Report. There has been talk of, the fairness doctrine being re-implemented. So I think it's a real threat, but not one that's really been talked about. So this act would protect Virginians from violations of the First Amendment by regulatory agencies trying to regulate, tax, or control the exchange of information between entities in the Commonwealth. And our biggest initiative is a call for a U.S. constitutional amendment, which we have called the Repeal Amendment. And this would allow the states to repeal any congressional act, law, or regulation when 2/3 of the states concur it necessary to do so. So if 2/3 of the states have exact legislation against something like Obamacare, they would have the authority to repeal that act. And this also is retroactive, so if there were older laws that needed to be repealed, it would be something that the states would have the authority to do. The hope is that this will revive the principles of federalism that our Constitution outlines. The checks and balances have kind of melted down a little bit. The Supreme Court has often ruled against the 10th Amendment or against states who try to say that something is against the 10th Amendment. So this would give the states the structural check needed to check federal power. And those are our initiatives.
Hello, I'm Donna Holt with Virginia Campaign for Liberty. We are also promoting 3 bills in the state legislature in 2011. Each of our bills is designed to protect private property. Now, the first bill would be, which we're currently working on, we don't have a bill number, but it is language that would repeal certain provisions in HB 3202 that was passed in 2007. HB 3202 has land use provisions that are giving greater authority to counties to, and in fact it even mandates that counties that meet a certain population growth, it mandates that they establish urban development areas, which is something that is being called for in the United Nations Agenda 21 under the Biodiversity Treaty that was voted down in the Senate in 1994. However, those provisions are being implemented at the local level because of this state law under HB 3202. So we are working to repeal that. Also, cap and trade. We're working to pass a bill, HB 1397, being introduced. And what this bill does is it would prohibit the implementation of federal building code standards or energy regulations that are being imposed on homeowners if cap and trade were to be passed. The regulations that are being imposed would require that everyone retrofit their home to meet those standards before they could sell it. And the costs are estimated to be up to $35,000 per home. So we are working to stop that action from being implemented in Virginia. The third bill would be the Interstate Commerce Act. That is being introduced by Delegate Mark Cole. The Interstate Commerce Act is a challenge to Congress's Commerce Clause authority. We all know that they've been overstepping their authority and taking control of businesses across the nation, and we want to protect the free market in Virginia by getting this important legislation passed.
My name is John Taylor. I'm president of Tertium Quids. We have 2 constitutional amendments and a statute that we'll be working on in the next session. In 2007, we were able to get a very good statute passed in Virginia dealing with eminent domain reform. That bill, which we were very pleased with at the end of the session, prohibits the government from taking property for the primary purpose of benefiting a second private property, from taking property for job creation, from taking property for tax revenue enhancement, for taking property for economic development. It prohibits the government from taking a person's property if they need 20% of the property for a road. In the past, they've taken the whole piece of property. They will no longer be able to do that. And it forbids the government from taking one person's property because adjoining property is blighted. We were very pleased with this statute when it passed in 2007. But since then, in every General Assembly session here in Virginia, the Virginia Association of Counties, the Virginia Municipal League, the Virginia Department of Transportation, and the Metropolitan Planning Organizations show up at the General Assembly session to try to weaken this bill. That leaves us with no choice except to try to get the statute into a constitutional amendment that cannot be changed without a vote of the people. And we doubt that the people will ever vote to weaken their own property rights. Second, we'd like to have a constitutional amendment to eliminate Virginia's income tax, both the corporate and the individual income tax. Using historical data, if we capped state spending to population growth and inflation, with just normal economic growth, we would be able to phase out the individual income tax and the corporate income tax in only 4 years. Now, 9 states have already done that, and what we know is that when a state eliminates its income tax, they experience higher economic growth and higher job creation. Lastly, we would like to pass legislation that would allow all taxpayers, both individual and corporate, to take dollar-for-dollar tax credits, either for the direct payment of educational expenses or for contributions to organizations that provide educational scholarships so that children can attend the school of their family's choice rather than the government's choice. Under this legislation, a person could take a tax credit for their own children to go to the school of their choice. You could have aunts and uncles taking tax credits to pay for their nephews and nieces to go to the school of their choice. You could have neighbors taking tax credits to pay for the neighbors' children to go to a particular school. Corporations would be able to do the same thing. Instead of paying state taxes, they could, let's just say if their state tax liability was $2.5 million, instead of turning that money over to the state, they could provide $1,200 scholarships to inner city children to attend the school of their choice. We see this as a much better alternative in a state where currently the per pupil of spending is $13,000 per child per year. And the results that we have achieved spending that amount of money is that 68% of the children in the 8th grade in Virginia are not proficient in reading. 70% of the children in Virginia are not proficient in math. and 1 out of every 4 children in Virginia never graduates from high school. So we have spent $104,000 by the time the child gets into the 8th grade, and those are the kind of results we are achieving. What we need to do is inject competition back into the education equation and have the schools compete with each other and allow parents to choose which school they think will maximize the abilities, the aptitudes of that particular child, rather than children being assigned to schools based upon zip code.